When a little girl in the park chased down a millionaire just to return his lost wallet, she had no idea she was about to change his life forever. This isn't a story about money. It's about a 5-year-old's honesty that melted a cold millionaire's heart. Willow Park sparkled under the golden afternoon sun. The grass shimmered with soft shades of green, and laughter echoed from every corner. Tiny feet ran across the playground, sneakers tapping against the pavement like a rhythm of pure joy. Birds fluttered between trees, their wings glinting in the sunlight as if nature itself was celebrating childhood. Among the giggles and playful screams was Malia, a 5-year-old girl with tangled golden curls and a pink dress dotted with tiny white flowers. Her cheeks were flushed from running, her eyes full of wonder and light. She chased her friends around the fountain, her laugh ringing like a melody that could heal tired hearts. Every time the wind brushed past, her curls danced wildly, and she'd pause for a second just to feel the air, like she was greeting the world itself. There was innocence in her every move, the kind that makes strangers smile without even realizing it. Not far away stood a man who seemed out of place in this world of color and chaos. Marcus Hale. His sky-blue suit looked too perfect, his shoes too polished, his eyes too heavy with thoughts that had nothing to do with playgrounds or sunshine. He stood near the swings, hands in his pockets, quietly watching a little girl, his niece, Emma, laughing with her friends. Her blonde ponytail bounced with every push of the swing, and she called out, "Uncle Marcus! Look how high I can go!" Marcus smiled faintly, but it was the kind of smile that ends before it reaches the heart. He raised a hand, waving back, but his eyes drifted away toward the trees, the sky, the sound of laughter he no longer knew how to feel. For years, his life had been about numbers, meetings, boardrooms, and money. So much money that even he had forgotten what happiness looked like. Success had filled his bank account but emptied his soul. And as he stood there, surrounded by children's laughter, something inside him ached quietly. A longing he didn't understand yet. He checked his expensive watch, sighed, and adjusted his cufflinks. Everything about Marcus screamed control, his posture, his voice, even his silence. But deep down, under all that calm, lived a storm that no one could see. As he waited for Emma to finish, his phone buzzed. Another email, another deal, another demand on his time. His fingers hovered over the screen before he finally locked it and looked up again. The sight before him, sunlight, children, joy, felt like a world he didn't belong to anymore. And yet, something about that park held him still. Maybe it was the scent of fresh-cut grass. Maybe it was Emma's laughter. Or maybe it was fate quietly preparing its first move. Across the playground, Malia was now crouched near the fountain, her small hands splashing water and drawing circles in the ripples. She looked up for a moment, noticing Marcus, tall, serious, standing in his sky-blue suit like a statue carved out of responsibility. Her curious mind wondered who he was. He looked lonely. Even a 5-year-old could see that. Her friend tugged her sleeve, pulling her back into the game. "Tag, you're it." Malia giggled and ran again, her little heart full of light, not knowing that before this day ended, her world and Marcus's would collide in a way that would change both their lives forever. A few minutes later, Marcus called out, "Emma, time to go, sweetheart." She ran to him, clutching her doll, and he lifted her gently, smiling again, the kind of smile that hides more than it shows. He turned to leave, walking toward his sleek black car parked near the trees. The breeze tugged at his jacket, the faint glimmer of sunlight catching the corner of his wallet tucked into his pocket. He didn't notice when it slipped out, falling silently to the ground, landing in the grass just a few feet away from where Malia now stood. She turned as something shiny caught her eye. Her head tilted, curiosity sparkling in her blue eyes. She stepped closer, bending down to pick it up. Her tiny fingers brushed against the leather. A wallet, heavy, real, important. She looked toward the tall man walking away with the little girl. Her heartbeat quickened. "That's his," she whispered. The playground's laughter seemed to fade for a moment, replaced by the faint thud of her own heartbeat. She stood there, frozen, holding something that belonged to a stranger, not knowing that her next choice would start a story that neither of them would ever forget. Malia's small hand clenched around the wallet. She took one deep breath, her eyes locked on Marcus's fading figure. Her little feet shifted, and then she started to run. As Malia sprinted through the park, her voice echoing, "Sir, sir, wait!" Marcus didn't hear her at first. The wind carried her words away, and his car door was already opening. Would she reach him in time before he disappeared? Or would fate make her take one step too late, changing both their lives forever? Marcus held little Emma's hand as they walked toward his car, the sunlight painting golden halos around them. The park's laughter still echoed behind him, but his mind was far away, tangled in numbers, deadlines, and the weight of yet another business meeting waiting for him. His phone buzzed again. Another email, another reminder, another reason to forget the world around him. "Uncle Marcus, can we get ice cream?" Emma chirped, her bright eyes hopeful. "Maybe next time, sweetheart," he replied absently, glancing down at his phone. His thumb scrolled through messages, his focus split between his niece's small hand and the glowing screen. As he leaned to unlock the car, something subtle yet crucial happened. His leather wallet slipped silently from his coat pocket. It hit the ground with a soft thud, barely noticeable under the rustling leaves and distant laughter. Marcus didn't even feel it. He opened the car door for Emma. Still lost in work thoughts. In his world, a wallet was just another object, replaceable, insured, unimportant. What he didn't know was that the moment it fell, his entire day, maybe even his heart, was about to take a turn he could never predict. The wallet landed near the slide, half hidden by the edge of the sandbox. Dozens of children ran past it, their sneakers missing it by inches. Nobody noticed. Nobody, except for one pair of small, curious eyes. Malia. She had just finished the last round of tag, her cheeks rosy, when a shimmer caught her attention. Her gaze locked on the brown leather glinting faintly in the sunlight. She tilted her head, frowning. "What's that?" she whispered, stepping closer. Her little pink shoes sank slightly into the sand as she crouched beside the object. Carefully, like it was something magical, she picked it up with both hands. It was heavier than she expected. She turned it over slowly, tracing the initials MH engraved into the corner. Her mind instantly went back to the tall man in the sky-blue suit. "Maybe it's his," she murmured, glancing around. The playground was full of movement, but she couldn't see him anymore. Just the outline of a black car far across the park. Her heart beat faster. Her small fingers trembled as she opened the wallet just a little. Inside, she saw a driver's license, Marcus Hale, it said, and several neatly folded bills. She gasped. "Wow, he's rich," she whispered under her breath, eyes wide. The sunlight caught the corner of a small photograph tucked beside the ID. Marcus and a little girl smiling together. The same girl now sitting in the car, his niece, Emma. For a brief second, the thought flickered in Malia's young mind. She could keep it. Nobody saw her pick it up. Nobody would ever know. Her friends were still playing. Her mom wasn't nearby, and inside that wallet was more money than she'd ever seen before. But then, her heart spoke louder. Her mother's words echoed in her head like a soft, loving whisper. "Sweetheart, doing the right thing will always make your heart shine brighter than anything money can buy." Malia closed the wallet gently. She looked at her reflection in the shiny surface of the ID card. Her small face, her curious eyes, and she smiled a little. "No," she said softly to herself, "this isn't mine." She stood up, clutching the wallet tightly in both hands. Her gaze shot toward the car, now a little farther away. Marcus was helping Emma buckle her seatbelt, completely unaware of what had fallen from his pocket, or the small miracle about to reach him. Malia took one deep breath. Her pulse quickened, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't thinking about the money or the man's wealth. All she knew was that something inside her said, "Go." Her tiny legs began to move. First a walk, then a jog. Then a full run. The park blurred around her as she raced across the grass, shouting in her soft, breathless voice. "Sir, sir, you dropped this!" But Marcus didn't turn. The car engine roared softly to life. Malia ran faster, clutching the wallet against her chest like it was the most important thing in the world. The breeze caught her hair, the sound of her heartbeat mixing with the hum of the car engine. She stumbled once, then pushed herself up, refusing to stop. The distance between them was shrinking, but the car was starting to move. Her eyes widened. Her throat burned. "Wait!" she cried again, louder this time. Marcus's car began to roll forward, just as Malia reached the back of it, still holding his wallet in her small hands. Would he hear her voice in time? Or would fate make him drive away, never knowing that the purest heart in the park was running after him with everything she had? For a moment, the park seemed to freeze. Just the sound of a car door closing and the faint whisper of wind through the trees. And then, in the middle of it all, a small voice rose, shaky, desperate, innocent. "Sir, sir!" Malia was running with everything she had. Her tiny pink shoes slapped against the pavement, her curls bouncing wildly behind her. The wallet was clutched tightly against her chest, her breath coming out in short, uneven gasps. Every step felt heavier than the last, but her heart wouldn't let her stop. The man in the sky blue suit, Marcus Hale, was almost at his car, holding his niece's hand. The black car gleamed under the sun, its door already open. One more second, and he'd be gone. But fate wasn't done with either of them yet. Marcus heard something faint. A voice, maybe? He paused, brow furrowing. His bodyguard, a tall man in a dark suit, stepped forward automatically, scanning the park. Then they both saw her. A tiny girl, no taller than Marcus's waist, sprinting toward them like a little soldier of honesty. Her face was red from the effort, her eyes wide with determination. She stumbled once, her knee brushing the pavement, but she didn't cry. She pushed herself up and kept running, her small arms pumping. The wallet almost slipped from her grasp, but she caught it just in time. When she was finally close enough, her voice broke into the air again, breathless but full of truth. "Sir, wait! You dropped this!" Marcus blinked in surprise. He wasn't used to being chased, not by adults, and certainly not by children. He took a slow step forward as his bodyguard moved protectively in front of him. "It's okay," Marcus said quietly, lifting a hand to stop the man. "Let her come." And so she did. Malia slowed to a stop just in front of him, chest rising and falling rapidly. Her cheeks were flushed, a single strand of hair sticking to her forehead. She looked up at the tall man towering above her, his suit shining in the sunlight, his eyes calm but curious. You dropped this," she said finally, holding up the wallet with both trembling hands. Her voice was so soft, it almost disappeared in the wind. Marcus stared at her for a moment, stunned into silence. He looked down at the wallet, recognizing it immediately. "You found this?" he asked, his voice deep and controlled. But something about it softened, the kind of tone people use when they're caught off guard by kindness. Malia nodded quickly. "It fell when you were walking. I didn't want you to lose it." Her small fingers brushed his as he took the wallet back, and for just a second, something shifted inside him. This wasn't just about a wallet anymore. There was a strange warmth blooming in his chest, an emotion he hadn't felt in years. He knelt down to her level, the fine fabric of his suit brushing against the grass. His blue eyes met her innocent gaze. "You ran all this way just to give this back to me?" Malia smiled shyly. "My mommy says keeping things that aren't ours makes our hearts sad. I didn't want my heart to be sad today." Marcus felt his breath catch. He looked at her, this small child with scraped knees and golden curls. And for the first time in a long while, he couldn't think of a single thing to say. All the business meetings, the contracts, the endless chase for more. Suddenly, none of it mattered. This child, with her tiny voice and enormous heart, had done something that money never could. She'd reminded him what goodness looked like. Emma peeked out from behind Marcus's leg, eyes curious. "Uncle Marcus, is she your friend?" Malia giggled softly. "Maybe now." Marcus's lips curved into a real smile. Not a polite one, not the kind he wore for cameras or clients, but a genuine, quiet smile that came from somewhere deep inside. He reached into his pocket automatically, his instinct as a businessman, to reward. But before he could speak, Malia shook her head quickly, curls bouncing. "No, sir," she said, stepping back a little. "I don't want money." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You don't?" She smiled, her blue eyes sparkling like sunlight through water. "Just promise me you'll smile more. You looked so serious back there. It made the park a little less happy." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, the wind picked up, rustling the trees, carrying the sound of children's laughter through the park once again. Marcus looked at her, truly looked at her, and something inside his chest stirred awake, something long buried under years of silence. He straightened slowly, slipping the wallet back into his pocket, still watching her. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "Maybe I've forgotten how." As Marcus turned to thank her properly, a strange thought crossed his mind, one he hadn't felt in years. Could a small act of kindness really change a man's life? He was about to find out, because the next words out of Malia's mouth would stop him in his tracks and make him question everything he thought he knew about happiness. Marcus blinked as the soft weight of the wallet settled back into his palm. For a heartbeat, he simply stood there, tall, composed, and silent, staring at the little girl before him. Her fingers were still curled in the air where she'd handed it to him, her nails small and uneven, a smudge of sand on one knuckle. She looked up at him with those wide, trusting blue eyes that didn't expect anything in return. Just honesty. Just goodness. "You found this?" Marcus finally said, his voice quieter than he intended. "It must have fallen near the playground." Malia nodded, a shy smile tugging at her lips. "It did. Right by the slide. I saw it before anyone else did." Her voice was light, but her words carried a gravity that made Marcus feel something shift inside his chest. She tilted her head, her curls falling into her eyes as she added softly, "I didn't want you to lose it. My mommy says money doesn't belong to me if it's not mine." Marcus's fingers tightened around the wallet. He'd spent a lifetime surrounded by people who wanted what he had. His wealth, his power, his influence. People who smiled only when they needed something. But this little girl, she was different. She didn't ask. She just gave. He found himself kneeling slowly, the polished fabric of his sky-blue suit brushing against the warm grass. When he finally met her gaze at eye level, he saw nothing but sincerity, unfiltered and pure. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said, his tone softer than Emma had ever heard it. "What's your name?" The little girl straightened her shoulders proudly, her smile widening. "Malia." He repeated it under his breath, almost tasting the simplicity of it. Malia, a name that felt gentle, almost like a whisper of kindness itself. "That's a beautiful name," Marcus said quietly. "It suits you." Malia giggled, scrunching her nose. "Mommy says it means calm, but I don't think I'm calm. I run a lot." Marcus chuckled, an actual warm laugh that startled his own bodyguard. It wasn't loud, just genuine, a sound that hadn't escaped his lips in years. Even Emma looked at him, eyes round, as if she'd never seen her uncle smile like that before. Something about Malia's innocent words, her honesty, and her pure energy washed over Marcus like sunlight after a long winter. He couldn't quite explain it, but it felt like this small girl had cracked something open in him, something he'd locked away long ago. He looked down at the wallet again and then back at her. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "there aren't many people who would have run this far to return something like this." Malia shrugged. "Maybe they just need someone to tell them it feels nicer to do good things." Her words hit him like a slow-moving truth. He felt his throat tighten, the corners of his smile faltering for a second. He looked at her, this tiny stranger, and wondered how someone so small could hold wisdom so big. Emma stepped closer, tugging her uncle's sleeve. "She's nice, Uncle Marcus. Can she come play with us sometime?" Marcus smiled down at his niece, then back at Malia. "I think I'd like that." Malia's eyes lit up like morning stars. She clapped her hands once and said, "But you have to promise to smile more if you come." Marcus exhaled, a quiet laugh breaking through. "I'll try." The park breeze lifted around them, carrying a faint scent of flowers and the sound of children laughing in the distance. For once, Marcus didn't want to check his phone, didn't want to rush, didn't want to be anywhere else. He found himself thinking about how strange life could be, how one tiny moment, one small act of honesty, could touch a heart buried under years of silence. Malia watched him closely, as if reading his thoughts. "You look like you think too much," she said softly. Marcus smiled genuinely this time. "Maybe I do." "Then don't," she said, shrugging. "Just be happy you didn't lose your wallet." He laughed again, quietly, deeply. The sound warmed the air around them. But before he could respond, a faint ringtone buzzed from his pocket. His phone, the world calling him back to reality. His smile faded just a little. He looked at the screen, then at Malia again. Something inside him hesitated. For the first time, he didn't want to answer. And in that single heartbeat, as the phone continued to ring, Marcus realized this tiny girl he had just met had done something no business deal or luxury could ever do. She'd made him feel human again. Marcus silenced his phone and looked back at Malia, a question forming on his lips. One that even he didn't fully understand yet. But before he could speak, Malia's mother's voice echoed across the park, calling her name. And in that moment, Marcus felt something unexpected, a strange, unexplainable fear of watching her walk away. Would he let her go? Or would fate give them another reason to meet again before the sun set? Marcus slipped his wallet safely into his pocket again and straightened his jacket. He looked down at the little girl standing before him, golden curls messy, hands clasped behind her back, eyes filled with light. He was used to the next part of encounters like this. A polite thank you, a quick reward, a clean exit. That was how life worked in his world. Something given, something received. So naturally, he reached into his coat and pulled out a crisp bill. "You deserve a reward," he said kindly. "You did something very honest today." But before the money even reached her, Malia shook her head so quickly that her curls bounced around her cheeks. "No," she said firmly, her small voice filled with certainty. Marcus blinked. "No, I don't want money," she said softly. "I just want you to play one round of tag with us before you go." For a moment, the world went still. "Tag?" Marcus almost smiled at how absurd that sounded. Marcus Hale, the multimillionaire CEO, running around a playground in a tailored sky blue suit? It was unthinkable. And yet, something inside him, that quiet, aching part that Malia had somehow touched, whispered yes. He knelt again, his expression caught between disbelief and curiosity. "You want me to play tag?" Malia nodded eagerly. "Just once. You look like you forgot how to smile." Her innocence was disarming. It wasn't a demand. It was a gift. Emma tugged at his sleeve, her eyes sparkling. "Come on, Uncle Marcus. She's right. You never play anymore." He hesitated. He could already imagine what his business associates would say if they saw him now. But for the first time, he didn't care. Maybe he didn't want to be that man anymore, the one who was too busy for life itself. And then, with a deep breath that felt like exhaling years of tension, Marcus stood. "All right," he said, loosening his tie slightly. "But I warn you, I'm pretty fast." Malia gasped dramatically. "Oh no, we have to get him first!" she shouted, rallying the kids like a tiny general. The playground burst into laughter as Marcus, still elegant in his perfect suit, took a few steps back, pretending to stretch like a serious athlete. Then, for the first time in years, he ran. Children's voices filled the air. Malia chased him first, her small feet pounding against the ground as she giggled uncontrollably. Marcus dodged left, then right, laughing as he narrowly escaped a tiny hand reaching for his coat. Emma joined in, squealing with delight. "Got you!" Malia shouted triumphantly as her palm lightly tapped his arm. Marcus froze dramatically. "Oh no, I've been caught!" The children erupted into laughter, their joy echoing through the park. Marcus laughed too, really laughed, his deep, rich voice blending with theirs. He hadn't realized until now how good it felt to just let go. Minutes turned into 10, and by the time he stopped, his tie was loose, his hair slightly ruffled, and his smile brighter than the sunlight itself. He stood there, breathing hard, hands on his knees, watching the kids collapse into giggles on the grass. Emma's face glowed with happiness, and Malia, the little girl who had started it all, stood grinning at him, her eyes shining like she'd just won the world. Marcus straightened slowly, his heart pounding for a reason that had nothing to do with running. It was peace, real peace. He hadn't felt this alive since he was a boy himself. "See?" Malia said between laughs. "You do know how to smile." Marcus chuckled softly. "Maybe I just needed the right teacher." "Then I'm a good teacher," she declared proudly. "The best," he said with a warmth that reached his eyes. For a few long seconds, the world felt simple, like money, work, and worry had all vanished. Just laughter, sunlight, and the sound of a man rediscovering what it meant to be human. But as Marcus reached down to fix his cufflink, running around a playground in a tailored sky blue suit, it was unthinkable. And yet, something inside him, that quiet, aching part that Malia had somehow touched, whispered yes. He knelt again, his expression caught between disbelief and curiosity. "You want me to play tag?" Malia nodded eagerly. "Just once. You look like you forgot how to smile." Her innocence was disarming. It wasn't a demand. It was a gift. Emma tugged at his sleeve, her eyes sparkling. "Come on, Uncle Marcus. She's right. You never play anymore." He hesitated. He could already imagine what his business associates would say if they saw him now. But for the first time, he didn't care. Maybe he didn't want to be that man anymore, the one who was too busy for life itself. And then, with a deep breath that felt like exhaling years of tension, Marcus stood. "All right," he said, loosening his tie slightly. "But I warn you, I'm pretty fast." Malia gasped dramatically. "Oh no, we have to get him first!" she shouted, rallying the kids like a tiny general. The playground burst into laughter as Marcus, still elegant in his perfect suit, took a few steps back, pretending to stretch like a serious athlete. Then, for the first time in years, he ran. Children's voices filled the air. Malia chased him first, her small feet pounding against the ground as she giggled uncontrollably. Marcus dodged left, then right, laughing as he narrowly escaped a tiny hand reaching for his coat. Emma joined in, squealing with delight. "Got you!" Malia shouted triumphantly as her palm lightly tapped his arm. Marcus froze dramatically. "Oh no, I've been caught!" The children erupted into laughter, their joy echoing through the park. Marcus laughed too, really laughed, his deep, rich voice blending with theirs. He hadn't realized until now how good it felt to just let go. Minutes turned into 10, and by the time he stopped, his tie was loose, his hair slightly ruffled, and his smile brighter than the sunlight itself. He stood there, breathing hard, hands on his knees, watching the kids collapse into giggles on the grass. Emma's face glowed with happiness, and Malia, the little girl who had started it all, stood grinning at him, her eyes shining like she'd just won the world. Marcus straightened slowly, his heart pounding for a reason that had nothing to do with running. It was peace, real peace. He hadn't felt this alive since he was a boy himself. "See?" Malia said between laughs. "You do know how to smile." Marcus chuckled softly. "Maybe I just needed the right teacher." "Then I'm a good teacher," she declared proudly. "The best," he said with a warmth that reached his eyes. For a few long seconds, the world felt simple, like money, work, and worry had all vanished. Just laughter, sunlight, and the sound of a man rediscovering what it meant to be human. But as Marcus reached down to fix his cufflink, his phone buzzed again, sharp and cold against the warmth of the moment. He hesitated. The screen flashed with a name that belonged to his other world. His office, his deadlines, his loneliness. His smile faded a little. He looked from the phone to Malia. Her small voice broke the silence. "Are you leaving already?" Marcus looked down at her, torn between two worlds, the one waiting behind that phone and the one standing in front of him with a heart too big for her tiny body. As the phone kept ringing, Marcus slipped it back into his pocket instead of answering, a choice that surprised even him. He looked at Malia and smiled faintly. Maybe, not yet. But he didn't know that this decision, this one small delay, was about to change everything that would happen next in his life. The laughter slowly faded, replaced by the soft rustle of the trees and the gentle hum of the park. Marcus stood there, his chest rising and falling, a small smile still resting on his lips. The kind of smile that felt real, not practiced. His sky-blue suit was slightly wrinkled, his hair tousled, but for once, he didn't care. He looked around at the children, their faces flushed from laughter. And then his eyes found Malia again. She was wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her tiny hand, still giggling softly. "You gave me my wallet back," Marcus said, catching his breath. "But what you really gave me," he paused, his voice softening, "was a reminder of how to be happy again." Malia tilted her head, her curls glinting under the golden sunlight. "You forgot how?" she asked innocently. Marcus smiled faintly. For a long time, she didn't understand the depth of those words, but she felt the heaviness behind them, like something inside him had been locked away for years. And then, out of nowhere, Marcus clapped his hands once. "All right," he said with a spark in his eyes. "Who wants ice cream?" The playground erupted. Children squealed, jumped, and cheered. Even Emma joined in, shouting, "Chocolate for me!" Marcus walked over to the small ice cream cart at the edge of the park. He bought cones for everyone, every single child there, as if he was repaying a debt to happiness itself. Malia held her cone with both hands like it was treasure. "Chocolate," she said proudly, licking the top. Marcus sat down beside her on a wooden bench, his own vanilla cone slowly melting in the sunlight. The laughter of the kids filled the air behind them, pure, unfiltered joy. "You know," he said gently, looking down at her small, bright face, "you have something more precious than all the money in my wallet, an honest heart." Malia blinked, her mouth full of ice cream. "But you have lots of money," she said innocently. Marcus chuckled softly. "Yes, but sometimes money can't buy the things that matter most." She looked thoughtful for a moment. "Like what?" "Like peace," he said quietly. "Or time. Or people who care about you for you." Malia's eyes softened. "My mommy says the same thing," she whispered. "She says love makes you rich." Marcus's heart tightened. There was something about her, her simple words, her quiet understanding, that reached deeper than any business deal ever could. He stared at her for a moment, seeing not just a child, but a mirror of everything he'd forgotten to feel. "I like your mommy already," he said with a small smile. Malia grinned. "You should meet her. She makes the best cookies." Marcus laughed softly, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "I'll hold you to that, Miss Malia." "Promise?" she asked, holding out her tiny pinky. Marcus hesitated for a second, then smiled and hooked his pinky with hers. "Promise." They sat there in silence for a moment, the world around them glowing with late afternoon light. The sound of children, the chirping of birds, and the slow melting of ice cream turned everything into a scene Marcus wished he could freeze forever. He glanced at Emma, laughing in the grass with other kids. For the first time, he didn't see a responsibility or a schedule, just family, just love. But as he looked back at Malia, something stirred inside him, a strange, unshakable feeling that their paths had crossed for a reason. She wasn't just a little girl who found his wallet. She was a spark, a tiny light in a life that had grown too dark. Thank you, Malia, he said softly. For what? She asked, her lips smudged with chocolate. For reminding me what matters. She smiled shyly, then looked at his half-eaten ice cream. You didn't finish yours? Marcus laughed. Guess I was too busy talking to my new friend. She giggled, her eyes twinkling. You're funny for a grown-up. He leaned back against the bench, closing his eyes for a second, letting the peace of the moment settle into his bones. For once, he wasn't Marcus Hale, the millionaire. He was just Marcus, a man sharing ice cream with a little girl who had unknowingly mended a piece of his soul. As the sun began to set, Malia glanced toward the park gate, her smile fading just a little. Her mother still hadn't arrived. Marcus noticed the worry in her eyes and checked his watch. Is your mom late? He asked gently. Malia nodded slowly. She never takes this long. Marcus stood, glancing toward the road, a shadow of concern forming behind his calm expression. Something didn't feel right. The sky had shifted into shades of orange and gold, sunlight pouring softly over the park like a warm goodbye. The children had started to leave, one by one, their laughter fading into the distance. Emma sat on the grass playing with dandelions, while Marcus stood quietly near the bench, hands in his pockets, eyes still carrying the softness Malia had given him. And then, from across the park, a woman appeared, walking quickly, her eyes scanning the playground with worry until they landed on a small, familiar figure. Malia! She called out. Malia's head turned instantly and her face lit up. Mommy! She ran straight into her mother's arms, nearly knocking her off balance with the force of her hug. Marcus watched the reunion with a faint smile. There was something deeply grounding about the way that woman bent down, hugging her little girl like she was her entire world. Malia's mother, a woman in her early 30s with tired eyes and a kind face, looked up, slightly breathless. Her gaze met Marcus's, and for a moment she froze, surprised to see a man in a designer suit standing beside her daughter. I hope she didn't bother you, she said quickly, smoothing Malia's curls. Marcus shook his head with a smile that was both gentle and genuine. Not at all. In fact, she might have saved my day. And my wallet. Her eyes widened. Oh, goodness, what happened? He chuckled softly. I dropped it near the playground. She ran after me to return it. Didn't hesitate for a second. Malia looked up proudly. I ran super fast. Her mother knelt and kissed her forehead. That's my brave girl. Something in that small, tender exchange touched Marcus deeply. He'd seen power, greed, and ambition all his life, but never this kind of quiet honesty that lived in simple people. Reaching into his coat pocket, Marcus pulled out a small, cream-colored business card. He looked at Malia's mother and extended it carefully. Someday, he said, his voice low but firm. If she ever needs anything, education, help, or just guidance, please reach out. The world needs more people like her. Her mother blinked, clearly moved. She took the card with trembling fingers. Her lips parted, but words didn't come right away. When she finally spoke, her voice wavered. You don't have to... I want to, Marcus interrupted softly. You raised her right. That means something. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she nodded slowly. Thank you, Mr. Hale. Truly. He gave a modest smile, waving a hand. Just Marcus, he said, his tone lighter now. Mr. Hale sounds too... serious. Malia giggled. But you are serious, Mr. Marcus. You don't even like ice cream that much. He laughed, holding up his hands. Guilty as charged. Her mother smiled at the sound, a smile of gratitude, quiet and pure. Then she took Malia's hand. Come on, sweetheart. We should head home. Malia nodded but turned back for one last look. Her small face was glowing in the sunset, her cheek still dotted with chocolate. She lifted her tiny hand and waved. Bye, Mr. Marcus. Don't lose your wallet again. Marcus chuckled, slipping his hands into his pockets as he watched them walk away. I'll try not to, little one, he murmured to himself. But even as he said it, he realized something. Malia hadn't just helped him find his wallet. She had helped him find a piece of himself that had been missing for years. He stood there long after they left, the cardless hand in his pocket suddenly feeling lighter, freer. The sun dipped lower, and the park emptied until it was just him, the fading laughter of children, and the quiet whisper of the wind. For the first time in years, Marcus didn't want to rush anywhere. He just wanted to remember this moment. As Marcus turned to leave, a small folded paper fluttered from his pocket. A drawing Malia had secretly slipped into his coat before she left. He unfolded it and froze. It was a simple crayon picture, a tall man in a blue suit holding hands with a little girl beneath a big yellow sun. And above them, written in shaky letters, were the words, "Don't forget to smile." Marcus felt something stir deep inside his chest, a promise he didn't yet understand. But soon, he would. That night, the city outside Marcus Hale's penthouse glowed like a field of stars, cold, distant, and quiet, the kind of silence that usually comforted him. But tonight it felt different. He sat alone in his home office, the room softly lit by the golden lamp on his desk. The same leather wallet that had fallen in the park now lay open in front of him. Next to it sat a single photograph, one that Emma had taken earlier that afternoon. In the photo, Marcus was laughing, mid-run, surrounded by children. His sky-blue suit was wrinkled, his hair a mess, but his face looked alive. He stared at the picture for a long time. That man, the one smiling like a boy again, didn't look like the Marcus Hale he knew. Slowly, he took the photo and slipped it into his wallet, right next to his ID. It felt symbolic, like he was storing a piece of his newfound happiness right beside the part of himself that the world saw. He leaned back in his chair and let out a deep breath, one that carried years of exhaustion, loneliness, and quiet emptiness. All this time, he had believed wealth meant control, power, and comfort. But a 5-year-old girl in a pink dress had shown him that true wealth lived in something far simpler: honesty, innocence, and a heart unafraid to give. He smiled faintly to himself. "You're something else, Malia," he whispered. For the first time in years, Marcus didn't open his laptop, didn't check his emails, didn't think about numbers or deals. He just sat there, letting peace fill the silence. The night breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the faint laughter of children from a nearby street, a sound he now associated with hope. He reached into his drawer and found the small napkin Malia had given him earlier, one he hadn't noticed until now. On it, drawn in a wobbly circle, was a little smiley face, and beneath it, in her uneven handwriting, she'd written, "Never stop being honest. The world needs your light." Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that comes from the deepest corner of the soul. He placed the napkin gently inside his wallet, next to the photograph, as if protecting two priceless treasures.